Just want to take a minute to apologize for the typo in the bulletin tonight. I don't know who Dr. Walter Smith is, but he's not speaking tonight. My apologies to Dr. Walter Powell, who will now come and speak on behalf of the Braddock Road Preservation Association. If you see Dr. Walter Smith, tell him his services are no longer required.
That's, yes. Oh, this is good. Contrary to rumor, I'm actually here on behalf of Pope Francis and the Holy See to thank Larry and Jay for their Christian service and to see if they'll come back into the fold. No, I'm just kidding. On a very serious note, I know the challenge and the angst of retirement. Much of my life was spent in Gettysburg, Pennsylvania, as involved in the secular shrine there that you all know by name, probably in person. And I took my final position as the first executive director of the Mayflower Society in Plymouth, another shrine, and flew in from there just a few hours ago because this is a very important place to be. But in retiring from the Mayflower Society, I also was faced with that dilemma about what next. And as you've already said so eloquently, my predecessors at this podium, God chooses a path. And that path has become clearer in the last few months. And so praise to that, praise to the Lord. There is an element of stewardship that most of you in this room may not know so much about with Larry and Jay. Because in fact, most of the faces I see here are faces I don't normally see when I come to Jumonville. I'm usually here for the annual French and Indian War, or history seminar as it's often called, which has been now running since 1988. We celebrated our 30th anniversary running the event last year, and this year our 30th anniversary as an incorporated organization, first called the Jumonville Preservation Association, and then several years ago the Braddock Road Preservation Association. So I think of America's attachment to its sacred places, but also its secular shrines. And on one level, Jumonville is not just an important spiritual place for so many, over so many years, but it is a place of importance to those who look back on the earliest days of our republic and before. I mean, I'm looking at an artist rendering of George Washington, young George Washington, who in May of 1754, in a story that many of you know well, received his baptism of fire a short distance from this building, and whose life would never be the same again. In fact, the young man who was killed in that skirmish, Joseph Coulon de Jumonville, was from a prominent French family, a family whose experience in North America went back generations, and a family whose connection here would lead to the first true global conflict in the history of Western civilization in the last 500 years. So Jumonville is an extremely important place historically. And since 1988, anywhere from 100 to 150 people troop up the mountain every year in early November to hear a panoply of speakers from all over the world, the country and indeed the global experts on the subject of the French and Indian War, or the 7 Years' War as it was called in Europe, to hear various perspectives on that conflict. And of course to hear the native perspective here, to hear the perspective of women, to hear the perspective of new immigrants to our new land, and much, much more, and occasionally even to hear the faith perspective of the 18th century, when the Wesleys created Methodism. What a coincidence. I first met Jay and Larry at an informal session held in the office in the summer of 1988, and I was brought here by a dear friend, Donald Hinks. Don, who is a retired pastor himself and longtime owner of Obsolescence Books in Gettysburg, had often hunted the ground of Dunbar's camp with his sons, and realized that it was time to stop hunting with metal detectors and to start getting together and talking about where did we find these items and what did they say about the significance of this site during the French and Indian War. And that informal gathering, which Larry and Jay fostered without complaint, grew And it grew really because they supported it. I have to say that it would not have been possible for us to continue this seminar as we've done, for as long as we've done, if Jay and Larry hadn't been enthusiastic supporters, not just helping us administratively as the whole staff did, but with genuine enthusiasm and passion. You've heard about Jay's commitment to the Grenfuss Museum, to the story of the Soldiers' Orphan School, and more, and Larry's, and it was very true. So we have veterans that come here every year because this place is extraordinarily meaningful to them. Think of it as the place where Washington had his baptism of fire, and that baptism of fire led to his development as an individual and ultimately to his greatest act of stewardship, leading our nation towards independence and beyond. That could not have happened, in a sense, if those early moments hadn't occurred here. And in fact, Washington came back to Jumonville. He came back to this area on a couple of occasions because the area meant so much to him. I can think of many things, but in the interest of time, I'll just say that over the course of 30 years, we were able to foster a better relationship between Larry, Jay, the staff, and our partners, the National Park Service at Fort Necessity National Battlefield, who've been a vivid presence here for many years. We were intimately involved in the French and Indian War 250th anniversary, which was now a decade ago, believe it or not. And we held, some of you will remember, on a foggy early morning in May of 2004, a reenactment of the first shots at Jumonville. And it was eerie because the atmospheric conditions were virtually identical 250 years later. It was almost as if, well, I'll leave that to your imagination. And Braddock's death on the grounds nearby, and the death of many of his men in that terrible retreat from Turtle Creek, from what is now Braddock, on July 12th and 13th of 1755, permeate this place. The artifacts that were left behind and the stories of those men and women who were on the mountaintop are something that we continue to be drawn to every year. We added to the collections of the museum an extraordinary collection from Don Hinks of artifacts and other items. We acquired a signature of Joseph Coulon de Jumonville and ultimately donated it to the National Park Service. We marked the Braddock Road through the camp here, the Braddock Road signs that many of you know, and more. But in all of that, I think I can say that we all take away an enormous gratitude for Larry and Jay's stewardship of the history of this place. I mean, after all, William Bradford, the second governor of Plymouth Colony, the longest governor of Plymouth Colony, whose 400th anniversary we'll be celebrating in 2020, noted that recording the history of Christendom was important in order to pave the path for the future. And it was vitally important for Christians to preserve the stewardship of those places that meant so much to them in their collective history. And Bradford wrote in On Plymouth Plantation, the most famous work in early American literature, "So as one small candle may light 1,000, so the light here kindled hath shone unto many, yea, in some sort to the whole nation. And Larry and Jay, your candles have shone unto many, yea, in some sort to the whole nation." On behalf of the Braddock Road Preservation Association, thank you so much.